Hey there, Aries Ascendant. If you want to know what's coming up in the week ahead, then stay tuned because I'm having a look at the forecast from Monday, the 10th of November, right the way through to Sunday, the 16th of November. Now, I'm recording this on the 8th. Really at the end of quite a fascinating week that we've just had. We've had Mars going into Sagittarius, we have Venus going into Scorpio. Let's not forget that full moon in Taurus. Today, Uranus is retrograding back into Taurus. And tomorrow Mercury is going to go retrograde. By the time I launch this, Mercury will be retrograde. And so what is coming up? What more can change in this week ahead? Well, you might be happy to hear that there's not too many changes. We've just got the changing signs of the moon from Leo to Libra. So what I'm going to do is have a look at how that lands in your charts and also speak about the only exact planetary aspect, between planet and planet that's taking place this week. And that would be Mercury retrograde in a conjunction with Mars. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. And hopefully it's going to speak to you. So if you're new to this channel, by the way, my name's Louisa. Welcome to Feel Good Astrology. Before I get going, as ever, I'm just going to share some thanks and real gratitude to the people who help support my channel and who help support me in membership, because really without your support, my life would be very different. So thank you so much. Right. So this is the chart that we're starting this week on. So this is the chart for Monday the 10th. And then we've got this chart ending it when we get to Sunday the 16th. Now, what I find, what you'll see here as I flick between the two is at the beginning of the week, you see Mercury's leading in Sagittarius and Mars is just behind. Mars is connected beautifully to Pluto. He's connected to Saturn and Neptune. And both Mercury and Mars are in an opposition to Uranus. So, they're a pretty dynamic duo, just newly in the sign of Sagittarius. I think that really brings up a feeling of, and you'll see it written here, this like bold thinking, revision and spiritual courage. Mars really likes a bit of a moral and spiritual ruckus in the sign of Sagittarius. He really stands strong for the principle. And Mercury, Mercury's not, this is one of his least favorite signs. He's not strong in the sign of Sagittarius. It's opposite and also in a square to where he actually rules. So he's not very strong here. However, he does kind of go on these philosophical quests, and with Mars's energy, I really think we've got some very bold thinking. And now that, as we start this, Mercury's already retrograde, you'll see by the end of this, Mercury has passed Mars and they're separating. I've listed that we've got the 3 moon changes: on the 10th moon into Leo, on the 12th moon into Virgo, on the 15th moon into Libra. That's going to be moving through your 5th house, your 6th, and into your 7th. Now, I've also got Mercury retrograde conjunct Mars at 6 degrees Sagittarius. Now, that would be just around where Mercury is right now. Mercury's going retrograde at 6 degrees just the day before we hit this new week ahead. Now, you'll see here that in the space of the week, they swap positions. So Mercury's going this way, retrograde, and Mars is going forwards, which is actually anti-clockwise as we see this on our chart. So I'll just show you again. You just see they cross over. Now, this is quite unusual that we're having 3 passes or 3 of these conjunctions between Mercury and Mars. The first one actually took place on the 20th of October at 19 degrees in the sign of Scorpio, just around about here. And when that came up, that would have brought in a really kind of bold and fearless voice, because it's in Scorpio and Mars rules Scorpio. And it was one that was ready to challenge some ideas and really uncover some of the truths about things that have been quite uncomfortable. It would have really started you up on this journey of real inner searching and really facing yourself. Now after that, they were sort of traveling around at roughly the same speed. And, Mercury moved on faster and Mars is just sort of catching up. Now, in this week ahead, on the 12th, they're going to be exactly in a conjunction. And by the end of the week, Mercury is just here and Mars is kind of zipping on. Now, they are going to go into another conjunction, but not until the 18th of January, when they're going to have a conjunction at 26 degrees in the sign of Capricorn. Now, this is interesting because you've got the first pass in Scorpio, the second in Sagittarius, and the third and final one of this series in Capricorn is going from your 8th house, where you're facing yourself, into your 9th house, which is where it is currently, which is really about you getting very clear about what you believe in and what you stand for. And also to be a little bit more adventurous and open-minded about things, and your voice is really going to get a spiritual courage around this time. And then, in January, at the end of January, when, on the 18th of January, where it's here in the 10th house, I think your voice can really carry passion and conviction. And, it's not without having faced itself. And so when it's coming together in your 10th house, I think you're going to be very, very clear about what it is that you want to do in your career and how you're going to do it. So this is interesting. This is evolving you from facing yourself to having purpose and faith and courage, to then kind of standing strong with your voice. And so with this particular conjunction that we've got with Mercury retrograde in a conjunction with Mars, it's slightly quieter because Mercury's retrograde. It's not so forthcoming as the other two. This one, very, very direct and vocal. And this one in January is going to be very vocal and very prominent because it's in the 10th house. But this one is a lot more, dare I say, dreamy. The 9th house is quite spiritual. It's philosophical. It's religious. It's a place where we put a lot of effort into like studying and examining things. It's also a place where we like to travel and move around and share a much bigger context, on things, like thoughts we might have take on a much deeper context. With Mercury retrograde, we're also revitalizing, revisioning, we're reimagining, all those words, we're going back over things to see what's going on. And so this is what I think is really coming up in this week ahead. You're in this place of re-examining your beliefs and your long-term vision. Old adventurers, like old stuff shows up with retrogrades. And so you might find that some of the things that you've studied, or some of the places that you've gone to, some of the old people that you've met are starting to resurface, and there'll be a very strong reason why. You might find that with your old studies that are resurfacing, it gives you a new direction that you're going to have a new voice on, so you'll remember something and go, oh my God, I totally forgot about that. Let's bring my qualification up to date, or let's dive back in. And so there's some joy in it, I would say. I would also caution you to watch impulsive travel or legal decisions. If you've got anything legal going on right now, this could be a time when you really want to watch what's going on, because Mercury's retrograde. When Mercury's retrograde, it's not necessarily a time when I would recommend anything that's legally binding. I would wait a few weeks until after the 29th of November before you commit to anything. In fact, I would probably wait until Mercury is out, because Mercury's going to go retrograde all the way back here. And then he's going to move forwards. But from that, when he goes direct on the 29th, although he's direct again, I would probably wait to make decisions until he passes this point where he went retrograde out. I always think that's really important, to wait until Mercury's out of his own retrograde shadow. And that's not until the 17th of December. So if you've got some legal things, you might have the opportunity to delay or really think about things much more deeply. Like where Mercury's retrograde, it's showing we need to really watch the details, especially with Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius, because in the sign of Sagittarius, Mercury, goes around and around the houses. Details can get lost and misinterpreted. It's really important to make sure you get everything right. And the 9th house has a lot to do with legal stuff. So I would, advise you are very conscious and take it much slower than you might have done were Mercury going direct. It is a time just to be a bit cautious around that. And similarly, Mercury is associated with travel. If you're booked into travel, I would absolutely recommend, again, you take it slow. So for instance, that doesn't mean to say you don't go, but don't leave everything to the last minute. Get packed a good week, but like get packed as soon as you can, really get everything all sorted. Check you've got the right visas, you've got the right documentation in place, check you've got copies. It's times like this with Mercury retrogrades when we can think we've got it sorted, it's all on the phone, and you don't pack a charger. It's that kind of thing where you might need a copy, and you might need a hard copy, so the electronics can sometimes go a bit wonky. So it's really, really important that you've got everything covered. In a similar way to legal things, just make sure you've got backups, and that you've kind of practiced this, you've rehearsed this. I think that would be pretty wise for you to do. But Mercury coming into this part of the chart and having this conjunction with Mars, I think is awakening something from the past that was adventurous and studious and belief driven. This is something that you'd have had some passion and also some enjoyment in. This would have been something that allowed you to evolve. And this is a time when you've been very bold in the past. So, whatever is resurfacing right now could be part of your evolution plan. Now, what I also like about this, as we're, flicking from these two screens, Mars is very heavily involved at the beginning of the week. He's in all these, he's in this opposition and this sextile and these trines. But by the end of it, he's really going off on his own. Now, he's not making any aspects by the end of the week. This is, him being a singleton. He's not getting involved in anyone else. It really is pure Mars energy in the sign of Sagittarius. And so, at the same time as you might need to take things slowly and watch the details, watch where you're going, making sure you've got everything that you need. Mars is absolutely an intrepid explorer. So you're going to have to work with that quite specifically to make sure you don't put yourself into a situation that you can't get yourself out of. Now, when we add in the moons as they're going through this, so if I go back to the beginning again, you'll see that the moon starts off just at the tail end of your fourth house. And on the 10th, Monday the 10th, the moon's going into the sign of Leo. That is, I think, really quite sweet because, the fifth house is quite romantic. It's quite pleasing. It's pleasure-based. It's a time of birthing. And, the moon is going to go into these lovely trines with both Saturn and Mars. And this is really helping you to use that energy in a playful way. So you might find that it's very, very motivating. You feel very inspired, very creative. And then on the 12th, the moon is going to head into the sign of Virgo. And this is when they're exactly in a conjunction. Now, in the sign of Virgo, your attention is going to be a lot on getting things sorted. The moon and Virgo in the sixth house here is really asking you to make sure you've got everything up to date. Make sure you're getting plenty of rest, plenty of good quality, wholesome food, because Virgo really likes some good stuff. And it's a time when you're being quite busy. Now, early on the 12th, the moon is going to be in a square to Mars and Mercury. So again, if you're doing any travel or any legal things or any meetings, in particular with this square, you really want to make sure you've got everything covered, because this is a day when you won't feel covered. You'll feel quite exposed. And of course, if you haven't got it covered, it's going to kind of ruin your day. And the moon in the sixth house is really wanting things to go very smoothly. So you really do need to double check. And then on the 15th, which is on Saturday, the moon is going to head into Libra, and it's going to be in the seventh house. Now, at that time, the moon is going to go into a sextile with both Mercury. If I go to this chart, you'll see it a bit easier. The moon early on will go into a lovely sextile with Mercury, where you'll be feeling a lot more communicative. You'll be able to have some deep conversations with loved ones. It could be quite flirtatious as well. And then later on, the moon's going to be in a sextile with Mars, and that is really bringing in some sexual flirtation and a feeling of adventure together. So I think this is going to be an interesting week. Like I say, this is awakening something. And, later on, when we get into January, when these two planets come back together on the 18th of January, you might find that the thing that you're standing up for in your career actually goes back to conversations you were having on the 20th of October, and also conversations that you're having in this week. So whatever you're freeing up in yourself, it's worth keeping track. It's worth like writing down what you've realized, because it may very well show up as essential at the end of January. So I'm going to leave that there. Have a fabulous week ahead and catch up with you all soon. Bye for now.